Hey guys, this is Tara with Kittens, Weights, and Tarot, and today I'm joined by many lovely souls called our 5D panel, and we're going to be diving into a few different topics, but we're going to divide this video into 3 sections, so you're going to see a part 1 coming out on YouTube. Make sure to look for part 2 and part 3, but today we're going to be looking into the dark side, the shadow side of spirituality. So let's go ahead and introduce everybody here. But first, we'll introduce me. I'm Tara with Kittens, Weights, and Tarot. All of our information is down below. I am the head mistress of the Leon Mystery School. I'm a mind astrologer, channeler, tarot reader, medium, also the creator of Wally's World Oracle. But let's go ahead and let's see, at the top of the screen, I see Suzi. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Suzi Gemini, and I am on YouTube. I do Western astrology and esoteric studies, and I do a daily spiritual practice. And I've known Tara for about 3 years, and I met her through YouTube. And that's about it. You can find me on YouTube at Suzi Gemini.
Hi, I'm Liesl. Sorry. Hi, I'm Liesl. Liesl Cigar Box Guitar. Yeah, I'm also on YouTube. Just started a new channel. I make crazy instruments out of wood and various other items. Yeah, again, I have a daily spiritual practice, generally starting quite early in the morning. And that's me, really. Yeah, short and sweet.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Dana, and my IG handle is Spoonful of Healing. I'm a Reiki practitioner. I am an energy healer enthusiast. I'm also not quite an astrologer, but love astrology and just love all of the esoteric sort of teachings, and also me, short and sweet. But I have so much that I'm so happy to share with everyone today. So I'm really excited.
I'll unmute myself. I'm Silver Star Priestess. That's my YouTube handle. That's the only social media platform I have open to the public. I'm a medium, psychic, intuitive. I also love cards, and I make my own esoteric crafts and all sorts of fun stuff like that. I love astrology too. So metaphysical stuff. But yeah, short and sweet and to the point.
All right, so we have this wonderful panel lined up for you guys. I have a lot of questions, but I know that people in the panel here also have some questions kind of related to this topic. So it's just kind of laid back. We're going to get cozy and just kind of talk about things from our own perspective, things that we've gone through our own life. And the people that I chose for this panel, I made sure were diverse. So many different backgrounds, so many different types of spirituality and understanding, and their points of view are very unique. And that's what I wanted to have brought to this panel, so that we can just engage in a very unique discussion, bring things up that maybe we hadn't thought of before, and things that we can ponder on. And also, as people watch this, if you have comments and things that come up for you, or things that you want to discuss, or have any sort of new ideas, make sure that you put it in the comment section down below. All right, so going into the shadow side of spirituality, my very first question to the panel: do you believe some people get into spirituality in order to soothe their egos? Do you have any thoughts or examples? So anybody who wants to speak first, just go ahead and have at it. We'll chime in.
Yeah, I actually would. So it's such an interesting topic, and it's something that I do see more often than not. And I will say, for me, my whole spiritual awakening, so to speak, was no picnic in the park like the rest of us. So I feel as though sometimes you can kind of tell intuitively where some people are coming from when they speak about their spiritual experiences. And I feel as though it can come from a place of telling people what to do as opposed to learning about other people's energies, realizing that we're all very different and what the experience is. So I feel as though it's great to give suggestions, but that doesn't have to be the only way. And I think sometimes people do get very stuck because of the ego that this is the only way, this is how you do the awakening, this is how you do the healing. And it's not that rigid. It's actually quite the opposite. It's very fluid, it's very open, and it's very unique to everyone's experience. I've learned all of this also too, not only through my own awakening, but studying astrology, which I love, also diving into human design and gene keys and all of these amazing soul mapping modalities, so to speak, where we can really learn about what's going to work for us. So I feel I do sometimes see sort of like that tunnel vision amongst people, that they feel like it's the only way. And I understand that sometimes, your clientele or your people will come find you. But I also kind of feel like some people, it's such a murky thing to navigate, especially in the beginning and even in the parts in between. So I think it's really important for all of us to always have an open mind, to realize that we're all so different, to push that ego aside. And when, even if I'm a teacher, if I get triggered by something, it is my duty, it is, my sort of obligation to myself to say, like, what's going on with this ego right now. And I think that's actually been a really hard thing to push away for people, is to pull away from that ego.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to chime in on that too. That, like, when I was first getting onto YouTube, I was already reading, tarot cards. I had for a while. And so my kind of segue into spirituality was through tarot, I guess, and a little bit of astrology and palm reading, through my grandmother's. But I would see all these tarot tubers, and I was like, you know what? I think I can do that. And so when I started on YouTube, I was getting into all these different like tarot groups, and it seemed that it was, like these, how do I say, exclusive clubs, where it's like, oh, if I didn't have all the knowledge that they knew, about tarot, knowing everything about all the different types of tarot there were, I just knew about the RWS. I hadn't studied up on all the Italian and, and all the French and everything. And so it was kind of like, it may not have been on purpose, but just, I felt like I was excluded because I didn't have all the knowledge, and I hadn't been a professional reader for as long as, some other people were in there. So it was almost like this elitist kind of feeling, like, oh, well, we know all this and here are all the rules. And I'm like, well, why do there have to be rules? And that's fine if people want to have rules for themselves, but I don't think there needs to be rules for everybody. It has to be the same rules, I don't think. So that's just my 2 cents.
One of the things I thought about for the question, what is the dark side of spirituality? And I'm applying it to myself. I didn't know the term, so I looked it up. It's called spiritual bypassing. And this refers to using spiritual practices or your beliefs to avoid dealing with difficult emotions or issues. It can lead to an inability to address psychological or emotional issues. Now, I'll give you an example. Way back in my journey, I would find things like The Secret, things of this nature, and it would draw me in, and I would kind of fall for false light spirituality. And this would hurt my day-to-day life because I would want to manifest something in my life, but I would fall for a certain program that was popular at the time. And so it hurt me because instead of maybe using action, I just thought, well, if I read this book, and I, envision it, it will come to me. So that was a handicap for me, is I was easily drawn into whatever was popular. Now, I wrote one other thing, is I have been dealing with this for a couple years, is I haven't always used my discernment in YouTube. Like you mentioned, Tara, that YouTube, there may have been clicks or rules. If I liked somebody's personality, I may be drawn in, and if I got an uneasy feeling about a person or their channel, I would continue to watch them, interact with them, and it was because I so badly wanted to be a part of something that I was afraid that if I went with my gut feeling, um, I I wouldn't be accepted into the tarot community. Now, after talking to a few people I do trust, like Silver Star Priestess, um, and also Tara, your channel, I'm just adore you, and friends like Liesl and new friends like Dana, I realize I need to go with my intuition, because this has hurt me uh, in my spiritual practice. Falling for false light is what I call it. So that's a situation. And I wrote this down, unrealistic expectations sometimes in my own practice. And the worst one for me, and this is really bad with my ego, is when I feel like I've actually finally learned something of value. Then sometimes I I don't like to judge anybody, but I found myself thinking in my head, I would never tell people this. Um, they're not right. Well, then I realized one day, who says I'm right? So I've had a lot of pitfalls in my spiritual practice. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys.
There's like so much running through my head now. I'm like, oh, yes, yes. But did anybody else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, briefly for me. Yeah, I think along my spiritual journey, it was very similar. I could sort of fall for like charismatic sort of characters and stuff like that. And I often thought that if everything wasn't spangly and sort of going really well, then I wasn't like doing it right, or I wasn't really getting it right. And I think I realized that I was trying to avoid the dark side a lot of the time. Several dark nights of the soul later, I realized that, as we've said many times, you've got to embrace both parts. You really have. And like, if someone's all shiny and sort of happy and like, it's like nothing's going wrong for them, then I kind of start to get a little bit suspicious that, maybe they're following a certain line. I heard a guy once, he said that, spirituality is too big to fit into one belief system. And absolutely, as we've said, I think that's true. And the one thing that sort of springs to my mind for me personally is know your limitations. Do you know what I mean? Because I've tended to overstretch myself at times, but I think we all learn along the way. So, yeah, that's it, really.
Yeah, dude. I know Heather wants to chime in.
I do. I actually have a lot for the shadow side. We have a lot of pitfalls when we think that we don't have the answers and other people do. And learning to listen to ourselves is so important because we really do have all the answers. It's just a matter of doing the work. And a lot of people, sometimes it's not meant for people to be in what we're doing in the spiritual side. It's just not meant for everybody. And a lot of people just want to either feed off your light and not do the work. And so it's been like an up and down. I fell into this category too, where I watched a lot of people. I was overwatching, and instead of actually working on what I was supposed to be working on, I was watching other people. And finding the people that you actually resonate with is so important, because then you have that small knit group of people that you can actually lean on and trust the advice that they give. And I actually did write a bunch of stuff down, but I can't read my own writing without this stuff, without my glasses. There's a lot of shadow work that has to be done with spirituality. And that's a really hard people that don't realize that it's hard work. And when you get into spirituality, you think it's all going to be huff and fluff and light, and it's not. And there is a shadow side to it. What else did I write down? A lot of like people say you need to do shadow work, but they don't give you any thoughts and advice on how to do that. But like, it is so individual for every individual. So nobody can really give you that answer. Like I said, it's really inside you, and that's for you to figure out. Being super hyper aware of things and conscious, and like how you feel about things, and caring about how other people feel, that you ignore yourself, is like a huge thing too. I've noticed. I have a lot. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I mean, I have a lot of other questions that can go along with what you guys are saying, so you'll probably be able to chime back in.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about, oh, sorry, like I had a thought. My Gemini brain is like, it's so ethereal up there. I'm like, come back, thoughts. But I was thinking about when I had made my shift, you know, to come out to Arizona, and you know, I had left a really long-term relationship. I got with James, and you know, we started up our little desert cauldron, and he helped push me to be more of who I really am. You know, not that I wasn't being authentic on YouTube, but I think I was just showing the lighter side of myself, you know, and I'm so afraid for people to see the other side, because I'm afraid of the other side, you know, and when that side comes out, boy, it's ugly. It's not a pretty one, you know. So I would just, you know, he was like, you need to be the real you, you know, you're not always super joyful, you know, all the time. He goes, and I think if you're more authentic, people are going to, who resonate with that, are going to follow you. They're going to come out. They're going to help you, you know, so that you could grow, so that they can grow. And I was like, you know what? You're right. And so little by little, I started putting more of the real me out there. And I got some pretty positive feedback. And then I got some feedback where my showing my shadow side triggered the shadows of others, which is a good thing. I don't see it as a bad thing, you know. So even though they thought that I was the one that they should be attacking, really it was their shadow coming up for them, showing them something. So in my mind, you know, there's the part of me that's the ego part that's very perfectionistic and hates criticism. And then there's the other part of me was like, heck yeah, trigger the shadows, baby. It's my Scorpio rising in there. So, and so I, you know, some of them were like, oh, you've changed, you know, you're not, you know, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. It's very hurtful when you show too much darkness, and I'm like, well, maybe for you. I'm just gonna continue to be me, you know, because I'm tired of being molded by everyone. You know, I've always been the good girl, and you know, I always get good grades in school. I always listen to the teachers, and I always do this and that. And I was like, dude, I'm like 41 years old. I don't want to do that anymore, you know? So that's just my 2 cents. But let's see. I think we went over one of these other questions, but let me see here. Just wanted to kind of touch a little bit more on it. Do you think that people could get trapped in their ego following a spiritual path? You know, even though there's very positive intentions going into it, like I want to heal, I want to grow. Do you think that somehow they could get trapped? Please discuss.
I do. Hi. You're like so nailing everything. And it's funny too, because these topics that you're mentioning, they've been really coming even more so into my awareness. And what I've been doing with this is just really sitting back and observing, and also even observing myself in the process. But I do feel like the irony of it all, and I think this is where it actually gets even more blindsided, that we don't see it, because when people feel like they've awoken and they're healing and they're doing this, it's even harder for them to spot when they're looping. So this is where I've started to see, to open up your levels of consciousness. As much as we speak, we need to listen. And another thing that I've really appreciated, actually, as much as I went through that dark night of the soul where you're kind of more by yourself and solo, my appreciation really came through my environment and the people that I started to interact with. And instead of finger pointing at people to say like, oh, they're triggered by me or this, whatever, I was like, I felt like things were coming up even within myself. So I was like, okay, let me sit back with this, because I feel like there's projection, and understanding our aura and our energy and how we can learn from one another. It goes very, very deep. And doing this actually helped to even pull me out of some cycles that I felt like I was looping in, or maybe being a little too rigid or stubborn, or thinking I'm a bit of a know-it-all. I am a Sag rising with an Aries sun and a Gemini moon. So in my younger years, that was very much my motto, is I know what I know. And I think throughout life, it's humbled me. And I've had some great mentors and teachers and just some really great people that were able to show these shadow aspects. And I think I started to develop patience with myself. So I have seen very strongly this looping. And I feel as though the ego with some people in that regard, it becomes even more guarded, because people don't realize through this development you actually get so emotionally tied to your way. It's a very interesting cycle to see, and even a little bit hard to explain, but it's definitely something that I've acknowledged and seen, have even went through it myself, where I feel like I've awakened and I should know it all. And then, boy, oh boy, just like I feel like the planets have cycles and Saturn will run through your houses and you'll see those challenging times. It's similar to that. It's to knock down each of the layers, because the soul is so complex. And could you imagine how ancient we all are? I do feel we've reincarnated here so many times. And if people feel like that they get it in one shot, I'm sorry to say, they're definitely wrong, because there are very, very deep layers to this. And just when you think you had it together, boom. And you have to be open to that change, because that's what really expands our consciousness. Because if you limit that, you're only limiting yourself. So I feel like for me, it's been very helpful to have your core beliefs, but keep that open, because you only know what you know right now, and what we know tomorrow is going to be even more than it was today. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Sorry if there's like some noise in the background. James is popping off on one of the targets. So.
Oh, that's fine. I wanted to mention that just by coincidence today, this book called Retrograde Planets and Reincarnation arrived in my mailbox. And I will backtrack. Yesterday, I put up a video about, do I believe in past lives? It was a subscriber request. And boy, it triggered people. And I wasn't expecting that. I lost a couple subscribers over it. And I thought, I don't care. I did this for the person who requested it. And I think diving deep into our natal charts and looking at our shadow side is extremely important. I read this a couple hours before we started this live. It was calling me out because I have several retrograde planets Jupiter and Venus and Uranus and Neptune. I think there are more. And I read what it said, and I realized that I probably didn't treat people good in past lives. And so instead of being triggered by it, how can information to make me a better person? And one of the things I wrote about my higher self is to transmute the ego. I had a download this morning right when I woke up. I need to forgive myself and forgive others, even if they hurt me. Forgiveness and love can transcend anything: fear, hatred, shame, guilt. So when you guys were sharing some of those things, I started thinking, my ego can be, I could become the person I want to be. I don't want to be what this book said, because it's not a nice person. So I just wanted to add that, and yeah, I saw in my comments, people were triggered by even talking about things that some of the mainstream might not want to care to talk about. So I just want to add that.
Yeah. I was thinking too, kind of going off of the shadows coming up and thinking we healed through certain things and them coming up again, all these layers and all these triggers. And James is really good at pointing out my shadows and the shadows of everybody, so which triggers my shadows. But there's something he says that I do, that when my programming comes up, when it's like my mother's voice or my father's voice, that I speak with such certainty. He says, it's like you're, standing up like in front of the class, like, oh, and this is this, and it's always this way. Thank you. He says, like, it's so, he goes, it's so weird. It's this like thing you do. And I'm not aware that I do that. And so then when it gets pointed out, I think, oh no, I healed that. I healed that a long time ago. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm all good with my parents. He's like, no, you're not. Like, there's, he says, like, still your traumas, like your family are still coming up. And I'm like, no, not that I think, it's like, and my ego is like trying real hard to, push back. And it's just interesting because I think, oh, I've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of shadow work. I'm all good. And it's like, no, still got to revisit it. So, but yeah, so if anybody else wanted to jump in on that, because
I will. Oh, sorry, Liesl, you can go first.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, just very briefly, really. I do believe in past lives and parallel lives. I read a book by Myra Kelly, actually, which is called Beyond Past Lives. And it's revealed in there, like some of her clients, that basically, me being the typical Capricorn, right, and I saw everything so linear, and didn't really understand the concept of like the now moment very well. Or like, things don't run in a certain order. They can come in like from all different directions. And I noticed basically as well through a couple of regressions and stuff like that, yeah, through more than many lifetimes, following the same life patterns again and again. So making the same mistakes in different lives. And I started to see correlations between things. And I think that kind of did broaden my mind a little bit. So, yeah, it's like you say, sometimes it's good to take a step back from yourself and just have a bit of a closer look at things, maybe open your mind. And I've heard you say before as well, Tara, like, listen to people you don't agree with. And it's absolutely true because, like, I've become more open-minded by thinking, I don't necessarily get along with this person or agree with everything, but there's certain things that they say that I just think, yeah, put my ego to one side. Actually, I think you could have a good point. So, like, yeah, that was it really. Just popped into my head, so I thought I'd say that. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome. Sorry, my family's here, so if you hear noise, it's them talking. I think like I'm an Aries sun, Mars and Venus, so I have had to learn that I need to step back and learn to listen to people and their side of things. And I think everybody has an ego. Everybody has drawbacks. Everybody has things that they're here to learn. And just taking the time to listen, because I've seen people get trapped in those loops that people get trapped in, especially when, like Tara was saying, we all think that we have healed everything, but there are layers to it. It's like an onion. You're just peeling back those layers to expose those tender spots that you need to address. And I always think, oh, well, I've healed this. I've healed this. I've done so much work, like you were saying. And I'm like, ooh, I still need to work on that. I still need to like work on my compassion and listening a little bit more. And I have my drawbacks, and I'm in areas, like I said, I have a temper. I've had to learn to settle that and simmer it. So we all just are here to learn, and just remembering that everybody's at where they're at, and everybody's going to judge you. Everybody's going to project, because they all have their own program running in the background. So it's just a process of everything. And anybody who tells you they know everything doesn't know anything. Like I was like, oh, I know so much, this and that. I've done that before. I'm like, oh, I still have stuff to learn. I need to shut my mouth.
So yeah, I'm like, I agree 100% on that. Because sometimes I'm like, I think, I don't know, I don't know where it comes from. It's something I probably got to work on. It's like, I think I know, like, or at least I have a really good grasp of something, and then I know pretty much all there is to know until something comes across, and I'm like, oh yeah, well, I'll just be over here. You know, I'm like, okay, there's still a lot more to learn. Okay. Okay, so one of the next kind of segues into that, into spirituality I wanted to look at was either taking a look at if you guys believe that spirituality in general, or spirituality, religion, all of it may have been hijacked by reptilians, or do you believe it's been inverted somehow? Something that was meant to be beneficial and healing has somehow turned into something else, or just thoughts? I just thought that might be a good one.
I didn't hear quite everything, but was your question, was spirituality and religion that was meant to be good turned it into something, Tara?
Yeah. Do you believe it's been inverted from its possible original purpose? Or do you believe that there's been some sort of reptilian hijack?
I guess I'm having connection problems, but if you guys can hear me, this is about it, that of Pisces, which we're coming out of for hundreds and hundreds of years. The churches wanted people to feel like they had to go to an important person, for instance, a priest, and that they wanted to make people believe that you couldn't access source, God, but I want to call source, spirit, that you had to go to somebody. So that actually disempowers whole generations of people. And I think spirituality and religion has hurt people because it has never tried to teach that we need to go within ourselves. Literally, one thing I realized one day is, like with Aries, is the I am. In France, it's je suis. Well, I started thinking about it because I like breaking down words. Je suis. That sounds like Jesus. We all have the ability to access Father and Mother of the Cosmos, source. So I think religion has been used to stunt our growth. I think that's changing, though. I think people are becoming awake and know that they need to go within. And that's what I wanted to add about that.
And so anybody else want to chime in on that? Because that's, yeah.
I
could say a
definitely
lot
do.
on that one too.
I think a lot of it is like you're saying, it's programming. I think it was done deliberately to stun us, to teach us to have blind faith and not to question anything. And the thing is, we need to question everything and find our own answers. Like Susie was saying, we need to go within. And we were taught to not, and just to pray and pray and pray, and you have to take action. You have to take control of your own life and realize you do have the power to change it. And that's not taught to us anymore. And it has stunted us majorly as a society, period. I'll keep it short and sweet.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think it's about separating us, because a lot of sort of spirituality, dare I say, religions and things like that. It seems to me that it kind of divides people. Like Heather was saying, like with these really sort of rigid rules and stuff like that. We're all part of the one thing, but we're all unique facets of that one thing, I feel also. And yeah, how one human being can be a hierarchy over another human being. We've all got a spark of the divine or God or grand spirit, whatever you want to call that. So yeah, to me that just kind of falls flat. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, and that's it really.
So that's another really interesting topic for me, that I'm such a huge researcher, and even just through my own experience and what I always felt like as a child, and I felt like this was always even a strong message for me when I was a kid, is that you don't need a building. You don't need someone else to advocate your connection to God. And I do feel as though there's been a lot of infiltration and there's been a lot of deception to stray people off of their path completely. I've never looked at God as a punishable God. I've never looked at God as, an angry God. I've always just felt nothing but love. And I feel as though it's really to instill fear. It's also to instill this karmic retribution where people are like, that's going to come back to you. And a lot of this sort of very distorted behavior. And I feel as though if we were to focus more within ourselves, focus more within our hearts, and to really get to know who we are and how we engage with one another energetically, we would feel much more empowered. I feel like religion really came about when the age of Pisces came about, which is what we're actually exiting out of. Pisces does rule religion. And it's funny because our world does have a background frequency. So now that we're moving into the age of Aquarius, we are stepping into a different frequency. So whether we all, everyone's kind of going through, there's so many of us here on earth, but it is kind of going in waves. But that whole religious aspect was really, I feel like, to constrain us. It wasn't to liberate us in any which way. I feel as though there are master manipulators in the world that know minds sometimes much better than we know ourselves. And they knew how to disempower us, but now we are getting our power back and we are getting to know ourselves and empowering one another. And each of us, we are teachers and students of the universe, and I feel like I learn from every one of you and I teach every one of you something. So I feel like this is a beautiful energy exchange that we do. And I feel like this is really what we were meant to do. So I feel like the new age spirituality on one extreme aspect, it's all bypassing everything and is amazing. And then on the other hand, you'll have like religions that will tend to focus on punishment, sins and punishment. And this is where all of the shame comes in with shadow work, right? And this is all stuff that we really do need to start to release. I think that when I do have, just kind of going back with that, when there's layers of the shadow work or that healing that needs to come up, I've started to let go of the shame behind it. I realize I don't have to know it all. I realize that I am expanding with God. And when I always say the God in me sees the God in you, is because we are all God. We don't have to go through a person. We don't have to go to a building. We don't have to do any of that. We can just sit and connect. And I think that if we were to all start doing that a little bit more, get back to our hearts, it's the most empowering thing we could do. So I definitely do feel like there's been a lot of infiltration with New Age spirituality, with religion. And ironically to me, they are actually very similar, which is the bigger deception. And I feel like this just causes nothing but divides instead of all of us celebrating our differences. And again, like even going back to what Liesl said and even Tara, you know, spending time with people you disagree with, because it's okay at the end of the day. You know, I feel like that's what allows us to keep an open mind. So that's all I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, so many so many questions, so many offshoots kind of coming up with that. And I was thinking of, you know, just as a collective, whenever there's this I would say drive within us to want to grow and improve, you know, even if it's very deep in some of us it's closer to the surface. And so we dive into things that we think will be beneficial, but the programming is to always listen to your elders, or always listen to people that you deem more powerful than you, more important than you, more enlightened than you. And it's taught from a very young age. You know, a lot of times it's programmed into our parents, whose parents, you know, programmed it into them. And it goes just so far back where it's don't question. You know, mom or dad tells you something, you don't talk back to us. You know, don't question what we say. You just take it as truth. And then you start school and you don't question your teachers. You know, your teachers know everything, you know, and if you backtalk them, you're going to go to the principal's office. You're going to get punished. And so then you take that into, let's say, a church or a synagogue or whatever, and you don't question the priest. You don't question the pastor. You don't question, you know, the person up front, because they have all the answers. They have the direct connection. You don't have that direct connection. You're made to feel small in every level, and it expands so far. You know, it's in everything. It's in religion, it's in our governments, it's in schools, and it's pervasive, so that when people really do want to go on a healing journey, their programming says, I need to find somebody who has all the answers, and I'll just learn from them and they'll tell me the answers. Or they'll have that direct connection because I can't have that direct connection. Just to me, I think there's a lot of cutting off of our divinity, but like you guys are saying, that's changing. A lot of people are starting to wake up to like, wait a minute, I could just do this myself. I could have this connection, you know?
Just one other thing I wanted to mention that Suzi had mentioned. I do also feel like in a disempowering way, it does really give our power away as well, like what you were both saying, where we'll tend to focus on sort of this
I
like
think I'm
misleading.
buffering. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, it's okay.
So if I'm not saying anything, it's because I was buffering.
So
Okay.
I do feel as though, so I do feel like it's a disempowering way for us to not take action in our lives. Like obviously we learn all of this stuff, but we have to implement it. We have to put action behind it. And when you're just kind of sitting there waiting for something to do things for you, it's very disempowering. One of the things that I've for myself have focused on, and it was something that if ever anyone had ever asked me for advice, it's what I would always suggest too, is to get to know yourself. Come back to yourself, because you can see how you like respond to the world. You know, not everyone is meant to quote unquote manifest. Some of us kind of draw things to us. We all operate differently, you know, so I feel like those aspects of religion and kind of just has us sitting back, and that's not what we're all meant to do. You know, kind of waiting for someone to do something for us. It's more so for us to actually take action and to start to empower ourselves and build the confidence. That's just something I wanted to add.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so yeah, I'm I'm like, I could probably go on for like hours and all of these different things. But before we end this section, because we have three lovely parts to our chat, was there anything else you wanted to add into anything about a shadow side of spirituality? So anything that kind of came up, anything you jotted down while everybody was speaking?
I will say one other thing. For me, for anyone who's like around the age of 28, start to pay attention to your Saturn. Because for me, my Saturn return, which it was Saturn in Scorpio, so you're talking about 2012, 2013, that's when my quote unquote awakening started to happen. And it really happened with like a crash course of everything scorpionic that was associated with it. So I feel as though for me that was really helpful, and everyone does whatever they resonate with. Pay attention to that Saturn. It really allowed me to dive into that shadow aspect because it really knocks down a lot of illusions or the programming that we go through society, parents, family, just all of these things we don't realize from little babies, that we just absorb so much of what is not ours. So that was just something that I wanted to add to that. If it's something that resonates with people, if they're interested in astrology, that Saturn around the 28, 29 to 30 mark is when you're probably going to feel that sort of pressure.
Well, I was thinking back to when I was like 28 and 29, and I had just, I kind of got started late as a high school teacher. So I was like, I was kind of in there around then. I remember there was some big changes where I was starting to, I guess, think or find my own empowerment, I think, around that time, where I was so used to people telling me what to do, even though I would go off and do my own thing. I started doing way more of my own thing and started listening less and less, I think, around that time. But any other thoughts or comments before we end this portion? Yeah, Susie.
I just want I just want to add something is think of the words we use, like Tara was saying, we've been programmed. And I was thinking, I have a TV right up there. I don't watch TV anymore. And if we use the word TV channels, what are we channeling? It's not Tara, it's not Heather. So we always have to be careful. The Matrix, that day in your chat, Tara, I wrote Matrix. There's a lot of darker, energy in this world, and I have a very strong spiritual for praying, but then I started thinking about what am I praying to? Am I there pray? So trying to help myself diving deeper into what I think, like when we talk about churches, government, things like that, how to control us. And if you go back to early education when you're in kindergarten, why does a 5-year-old have to ask to go to the bathroom? Or they're told, well, you can go in 10 minutes. It's like they wanted to make us lose our self-esteem and stomp out our creativity. And I think this generation that's coming in won't be dealing with that as much. It's time to say no, and just be the individual. Even things as much as they made sure they got us all into cities, and they made sure we stopped growing our own food. They made sure that we wore rubber soles, tennis shoes that people spent $200 on a pair of tennis shoes, rubber soles. That's what the Beatles album was called, Rubber Soul. They were trying to let you know that you're not even grounding to the earth. I buy a certain kind of shoe, that doesn't have that rubber. I spend, $38 for a pair of flip flops because it has something in it that allows me to ground to the earth. I think they wanted to keep us out of nature because that is our source. And I was thinking one other thing. Why is there a cost of living? We are born, we have breath. There shouldn't have to be a cost of living. There is plenty of abundance on planet Earth, fruit and water, and yet they've somehow tricked us into thinking that we need their eye control and what to do for our own lives. I think it's time in the age of Aquarius, humanity wins. Humanity gets to create and find its true soul passion. So I just wanted to add that. This is how my mind works. It's the Gemini mind. Somebody says something like programming, and then I start thinking about how they do that. Just wanted to mention that.
It's called television for a reason, and off the goddess media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've not had a TV set for 10 years now. And it's made a real difference. I just wanted to say that. One thing that came up listening to all of you was like I said, I never understood all this kind of having to worship something or venerate. And then one day, because Suzi with the play on words, it just popped in my mind, don't venerate, resonate. And I thought, yeah, this is what it seems to me, like so much of it, like you're saying, seems to be about getting on your knees and getting away from yourself while you're focusing on something else, but the divine's within. So I never really could understand that, people talk about the divine, and they look up to the high heavens or whatever, look up to the sky, and why not look around, sort of within. So yeah, just thought provoking. There you go. Thanks.
There was a couple of things that popped up. Suzi had me think of something, and Liesl said something as well. But first was Suzi kind of talking about, the permission to go to the bathroom in school. And I had this memory of when I was really young. I was so trained because I went to Catholic school for like a couple of years. And I had to raise my hand to go to the bathroom. So I started doing that at home when I would be at the dinner table, and I would raise my hand, and my parents were like, "What the heck are you doing?" And I was like, "Mama, can I go to the bathroom?" And she's like, "Yeah, go to the bathroom." What are you doing? And I didn't I thought that I would get in trouble if I didn't raise my hand and ask first. And it made me think of, I don't know if you guys know who Daryl Anka is. He's a channeler, and he has this entity that he's always channeling, and his entity is always talking about permission slips, that human beings give themselves permission slips to be able to go inwards or to do certain things. So if, let's say, somebody wanted to go on a healing journey, but they say, the only way my intuition works is through my tarot cards, let's say. The entity was saying that would be your permission slip to heal. You say, I have to use this thing in order for me to heal. There needs to be a step in between. Or, which is fine. It's not, talking down to anybody. It's just saying, look at all the permission slips that you have, in your life, where you say, I can't do this unless I do this. I can't do that unless I do that. There's a permission slip in the way. So there was that, I wanted to touch on. And then I was thinking about, Liesl, you're everything about you is music, musical, your creativity, everything coming out in your art, your music, the art that you put on your musical instruments and everything. And a lot of that I feel is stifled because within our creativity, we don't necessarily have to do music or be sculptures or, things like that, but that's stifled. They always tell us, oh, you don't want to be a starving artist. that you don't want to do that. You don't even look into, there's no money in that, because money should be our ultimate, Lord and Savior, right? Is money. And you don't want to do that, so there's always this, stay away from things that are going to make you go inwards. Stay away from the things that are going to make you listen to your heart. Music's going to make you listen to your heart. When you paint, there's nothing you can do but listen to your heart. When you draw, when you write poetry, when you journal and all of these things, and it seems like all of that's like, no, that's if you have time, because there's way more important things in the world that you should be doing. You should be focusing on your taxes. You should be focusing on your job, who is for somebody else. You should be focusing on this and that, and stay away from the creative things, which actually could bring you back to yourself, which Dana was talking about. Figure out who you are, who you really are, because you're probably not going to find that in somebody else without looking within. So yeah, definitely a lot of good points, you guys. A lot of good things came up. Were there any other things you guys wanted to mention or touch on?
Real quick. I have always been the person that says, someday when, or when this happens, or when I have this amount of money. And I saw on somebody's video, it wasn't in the tarot community, they talked about the day that never comes. I will go on that trip when. We need to stop spell casting ourselves for someday when, because that day won't come. Do it now. You get that heart, her music, Liesl's music. Do it. Don't think, well, I can do it when this is happening in my life. So I just wanted to say, shout out, Liesl. Keep doing what you're doing, and everybody in this chat. I just want to mention that.
You guys are amazing. So, okay. Don't worry, people who are going to be watching this on YouTube, there is a couple other parts that you will be able to watch. We're going to be going into our unique daily practices. So practices that are not mainstream or mainstream spiritual, or whatever you want to call it. And then we're going to be also going into our higher self and our 3D life. So how do we bring what goes on in 4 and 5D and above? Everybody's got multi-dimensional souls. How do we bring that into our very dense 3D world, which seems to function, to very linear factions? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But we're going to go ahead and end this portion for here before we jump into the second part. So I encourage you guys to join us in part 2. So stay tuned for that video. But thank you to Suzi and Liesl and Dana and Heather.